Hi everybody, it's Chris and welcome to another video by the Infinity System. Today's video is part 2 of our series, Comfortably Numb, Substance Use and DID. As with our other heavier multi-part episodes, we felt that it was best to lead with a piece of footage recorded when we were at the very beginning of our journey, right around the time when we were just diagnosed or just afterwards, and we use this as a practical example to help show you the kinds of pressures that you're undergoing when you're first diagnosed and then later on as you live with DID. There's a whole host of issues, mental, physical, emotional. You're up all night because you have sleep paralysis or flashbacks. You have flashbacks during the day. You both want to hug and cuddle with your wife or partner, and then you want to shove them away out of fear the next. It's really tough. There's a lot that can go on. And then you throw in the denial. Am I faking this? Is this just all in my head? No pun intended. There's a lot of issues that can deal with, and it presses in on you, and it's tough to fight. With all your tools and your DBT and everything, to keep you going, sometimes it just fails. And you want it to all go away, or we're trapped in a hell from which we can't escape. And sometimes we want it to stop. We want to have 5 blessed minutes where we're not touched by all of this, when we're not in physical pain, emotional pain, psychic pain. And so you can turn to drugs. You can turn to substance abuse. Now, rather than this episode being an anti-drug episode, or to even attempt to cover the myriad of treatment options that are out there, we have put links to those, Alcoholics Anonymous and substance abuse hotlines in the description below, but we're not going to tread on territory that we're not qualified to cover. But those links are down there. If you are in need or in trouble, go ahead and give those a hit, okay? Please. So what we've chosen to do instead is to focus on the biochemical aspects, the needs and the explanations for substance abuse, and especially how and why it impacts DID and trauma survivors. So we talk about trauma. The first thing that we need to define is, so what is trauma? And how does it relate to substance use? The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, otherwise known as SAMHSA, describes trauma as any event or set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as life-threatening or emotionally or physically harmful. This trauma has lasting effects on an individual's ability to function socially, mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Now, at this point, we need to do a little bit of review and cover what's known as the stress response cycle. Now, a lot of you may know this as the fight or flight, freeze, fawn reaction. Now, we actually go into a great amount of detail on the stress response cycle in our video, Learning to Love Again, Sex, Trauma, and DID. So if you want a good in-depth explanation of this basic response, go hit it over there. But we'll go ahead and we'll gloss over the highlights here. So, the stress response cycle, how does this come about? What happens is that when your brain detects a possible danger, it kicks itself into high gear, and it takes in all of the sensory data, sight, sound, smell, touch, taste, your environment, the light, the temperature, everything, and based on previous experiences, all of your 5 senses and everything else that it's taking in, it determines whether or not the situation that you're in is a threat. If the brain decides that it is a threat, it activates the hypothalamus, which is basically, think of it as the master control unit of the brain and the stress response cycle. Now, what it does is it in turn activates the pituitary gland and the adrenal medulla. Now, what these two little lovely guys do is they flood your body with cortisol and adrenaline. The adrenaline rush. But your body not only wants you to have the speed and the increased reflexes to deal with whatever's happening to you, it also doesn't want you to be crippled in pain while you're doing it. So as a result, your body also releases what are called endogenous opioids, which are your body's natural painkillers. So you've got adrenaline and cortisol flooding through your body, and your body's turning down the volume on your pain reception as well. Now, why is this important? Because after the trauma or the event is over, the body, the brain says, oh, it's okay, let's get rid of all these chemicals and everything comes back down to normal, right? Well, not in the case of severe trauma. If the trauma, the amygdala, that is, those little almond-shaped parts of our brain, if it's responsible for this exact function, if it senses that the trauma is too intense for the psyche to deal with, all the aspects of the experience, the five senses, your sense of time, your sense of self, everything around you is then chemically encoded on the posterior medial cortex, which is a thin layer of cells in the deep brain responsible for memory. This is where they get put. Now what this does is this effectively locks the stress response cycle in place in the on mode. The imprint is going on before the stress response cycle has completed. So essentially, what the amygdala is doing is it's encoding these elevated levels of adrenaline into your brain. And because we never resolve, our system is being constantly inundated with levels of adrenaline. Now, the brain attempts to compensate or rebalance the chemicals, but it's unable to produce enough opioids to meet the increasing need to counterbalance the cortisol and the adrenaline. It can't produce enough of it to balance things out. So you can see where just simply by this biochemical basis that this could lead to a desire or need for the type of drugs that mimic this effect, the opioid effect. Central nervous system depressants. Now, CNS suppressors act exactly how it sounds. They suppress your nerve impulses. They suppress your central nervous system so that your brain is not taking in information as rapidly. Now, DID systems, and trauma victims may lean towards these, we're not experts, but they may lean towards these types of chemicals because of the constant stress response cycle burnout. The cortisol and the adrenaline, which is, counteracted by the opiate-based endogenous opioids. So, most of the commonly abused drugs for trauma victims are opiate-based, with the exception of cocaine, meth, the methamphetamine side of the spectrum, and alcohol, which are stimulants. Alcohol is actually both a stimulant and a suppressor, but we're going to get to that. So this leads us to the top three. Let's take a look at the top three most commonly abused drugs. And this is for everybody out there as well. So, number one, alcohol. As we were just talking about, alcohol is in fact a twofold tool. It is a central nervous system suppressor, and it interacts directly with the hypothalamus and pituitary glands, those two little buggers who are responsible for flooding your body with the cortisol and the adrenaline. Now, how does alcohol interact with these guys? Well, here's a prime example. The classic, you're drunk, you get horny, but you can't do it. So this prime example, classic desire for sex increases, but the ability for sex decreases because the alcohol is hitting your hypothalamus and your pituitary glands at the same time. Now, what this actually does is to stimulate the numbing effect, the need for the endogenous opioids. It's mimicking that or supplanting it, and it's suppressing the adrenal gland and the cortisol and enhancing or replicating the opioid response in return. And that brings us to number two, marijuana. Now, like alcohol, marijuana can both have a central nervous system depressant and stimulant effect, and also in conjunction with the use of alcohol may well increase the effects of alcohol that we just talked about. Now, other central nervous system depressants, for example, prescription pills, which we're going to get to in a minute, marijuana use in combination with central nervous system depressants might increase the sedative effect of these drugs, kick them into high gear, as it were, that extra BAM! Okay. Now, this actually is going to depend entirely upon which of the 3 different types of marijuana that the user is using. There are 3 basic types. Sativas, which are more like taking a cup of coffee in the morning, boom, buzz, energy. Hybrids, which, okay, well actually we should cover indicas first. Indicas are the exact opposite end of the spectrum. They're the on the couch with a big bowl of munchies in front of you. Hybrids is part of the 2. They have both sativa and indica effects. So, again, as with alcohol, you're hitting the same notes. You're hitting the hypothalamus and the pituitary, and you're also increasing the opioids to help balance it out. For our part, we actually use this ourselves. We use a sativa in the morning in order to get ourselves going and help recenter us, and then a hybrid during the evening hours, and then an indica to go ahead and help sedate us for sleep. This is our main medicine, along with our prescriptions to help us function. We have severe back pain, which was caused by the trauma, and basically had 2 choices. We could either A, use all the painkillers, or B, use medical marijuana and keep ourselves out of the chair and stop us from being a zombie, from taking too much. Number 3, painkillers and prescription medications, which is the 3rd most commonly abused drug. The abuse potential for these drugs is enormous. Personal experience for us. Our late wife suffered from kidney failure. That's actually what took her, that and the diabetes to begin with. But once her kidneys had failed, she was in intense pain all the time, and the doctors had prescribed oxycodone for her. And she was not a person to take drugs at all lightly. We were very much on the same plane there, but she was in severe pain, and they had issued her a prescription for oxycodone and or hydrocodone. I forget. It was one of them. I believe it was oxycodone, and she had been taking those for pain. But it didn't occur to us that they would build up in her system. That because her kidneys weren't functioning anymore, that it wouldn't be flushing out of her system. And as a result, one night when we were laying down watching TV, all of a sudden she stopped breathing, slumped over, and turned blue. We got her to the floor and called 911 and began to provide resuscitation, but that was rough. She had went into an opioid coma, and paramedics came and gave her an injection which brought her back around to consciousness, and that's when we found out, okay, we should have thought about her not filtering these things through her system. But this gives you a practical example and a first-hand example of just how dangerous opioids can be. But the percentage of prescription drug abuse is very, very high, particularly for younger folks, because their older parents might have prescriptions for painkillers, and it's real easy if the parents are, not looking to go and snag some of those pills. So we've covered the top 3: alcohol, marijuana, and prescription pills, opiate-based painkillers. And we've all seen that they do the same thing. So what are some alternatives? Some healthy alternatives to help deal with this. Is there anything that non-chemically can stimulate the production of those same endogenous opioids? Yes, there are. There are many techniques that have been shown to increase exactly those kind of chemicals along with dopamine. Some primary examples include yoga, tai chi, to a lesser extent any discipline that introduces a breath-body connection, boxing, martial arts. Many martial artists are familiar with the principle of channeling chi, or the chi energy. Let's see, some of the others include, of course, support groups. People who are going through exactly what's going on with you can very well help. It stimulates that, I'm not alone. I am, actually, I feel a little bit better about myself knowing that I'm not the only one out there who's going through this. That's slightly twisted thinking, but we've all experienced it. Art therapy. You can just try to get it out that way. Creating something, actually, you fall into what's called the Zen state or the zone state, when these areas of your brain are actually activated and producing the endorphins, the pleasure chemicals. So, in a more physical sense to help deal with the frustration and the anger. One of the things that our therapist said was anger is an action emotion on many different levels, not only emotionally, but physically, biochemically, because as you're taking a physical action, you are increasing the adrenaline and the endorphins. In our case, when we would get angry, she would say, well, go back out back and bash up some of those pallets back there, or the old furniture. And so we'll take our 10-pound sledgehammer and go back out there and destroy the crap out of stuff while we're screaming four-letter obscenities at the top of our voice and calling our abusers things that human ears should not hear. Punching your mattress or your pillow. It may sound stupid, but at least it's a non-harmful way to help stimulate these same chemicals. Exercise, for example, is well known for this. Short-term exercise has been shown to briefly increase the production of endogenous opioids, endorphins, the runner's high, the adrenaline high that we were talking about earlier. Meditation and mindfulness has also been shown to increase endorphin production. Now here's one for you. Spicy foods. Research on peppers shows that the spice may trigger a pain sensation in the mouth, the capsaicin bursting on your tonsils, and that pain reflex then prompts an increase in the endogenous opioids, the endorphins. So you can also stimulate it through diet, which also might help to explain our last one and why so many of us find this our weakness: dark chocolate. Dark chocolate has been shown to increase endorphins, but there's a caveat: no milk chocolate here. It needs to be at least 70% cocoa. So if you keep a lot of dark chocolate around and you got a craving for that Godiva, now you know why. Not that we're saying that it would be overall healthy to just go through like 5 pounds of dark chocolate. Not that we've ever done anything like that. So we hope that we've given you guys some food for thought on these issues and the need for the trauma survivor to have the opioids to balance out the cortisol and the adrenaline that your body is being flushed with. And hopefully this will give you a little bit more leeway and forgiveness for yourself for any missteps that you might have had along this road. And remember, everyone has their own line of how much they can take. Your therapist would be the first person to tell you this. And that's one thing that you do need to do, is to be open and communicative with your family members or your therapist about substance use. If you're drinking alone or whatnot in the dark, or using substances in order to cope hardcore, then you got a problem and you need to reach out for help. And to that end, we have provided links for help in the description below, both UK and US based. So please, if you are in need, check those out. Don't hesitate, okay? That's it for this time, guys. We hope that we've given you a broader picture of the overall issues going on with substance use and abuse, and why, as systems and as trauma victims, we can fall into that trap so easily, and also why it's okay sometimes to take the edge off, as it were. Forgive yourself for those missteps. Everybody's got their own line. Everybody has their own limit of how much they can take. And I mean, hey, if the neurotypicals can enjoy a glass of wine to deal with their shitty day, I don't think there's any reasons why systems can't do the same responsibly. So as always, we would like to remind you that you are loved, that you are strong, and that you're not alone. I'm Chris. Thanks for watching.